Fireside Tailes for Wolfgang, Episode 53. Greetings and salutations. I'm Hunter Ackerman, here to read some classic literature for you. This poem is called The Snowman by Wallace Stevens. One must have a mind of winter to regard the frost in the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow, and have been cold a long time to behold the junipers shagged with ice, the spruces rough in the distant glitter of the January sun, and not to think of any misery in the sound of the wind, in the sound of a few leaves, which is the sound of the land, full of the same wind that is blowing in the same bare place. For the listener who listens in the snow, and nothing himself, beholds nothing that is not there, and the nothing that is. Fireside Tailes for Wolfgang. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions YouTube channel, Caps Media Television Channel 6 in Ventura on KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM, and on the KPPQ Podcast Network. Episodes can also be viewed on Pasadena Media, either on Spectrum Charter Channel 32 or on AT&T Uverse Channel 99. Published in 1926 by A. Milne. This is Winnie the Pooh by A. Milne, copyright 1926. And it has a foreword that reads like this. To her, hand in hand we come, Christopher Robin and I, to lay this book in your lap. Say you're surprised. Say you like it. Say it's just what you wanted, because it's yours. Because we love you. Winnie the Pooh. Introduction. If you happen to have read another book about Christopher Robin, you may remember that he once had a swan. Or the swan had Christopher Robin, I don't know which. And that he used to call this swan Pooh. That was a long time ago, and when we said goodbye, we took the name with us, as we didn't think the swan would want it anymore. Well, when Edward Bear said that he would like an exciting name all to himself, Christopher Robin said at once, without stopping to think, that he was Winnie the Pooh. And he was. So, as I have explained the Pooh part, I will now explain the rest of it. You can't be in London for long without going to the zoo. There are some people who begin the zoo at the beginning, called way in, and walk as quickly as they can past every cage until they get to the one called way out. But the nicest people go straight to the animal they love the most and stay there. So, when Christopher Robin goes to the zoo, he goes where the polar bears are, and he whispers something to the third keeper from the left, and doors are unlocked, and we wander through the dark passages and up steep stairs, until at last we come to the special cage, and the cage is opened, and out trots something brown and furry. With a happy cry of, "Oh, bear!" Christopher Robin rushes into its arms. Now, this bear's name is Winnie, which shows what a good name for bears it is. But the funny thing is that we can't remember whether Winnie is called after Pooh or Pooh after Winnie. We did know once, but we've forgotten. I had written as far as this, when Piglet looked up and said in his squeaky voice, "What about me? My dear Piglet," I said, "the whole book is about you."
"So it is about Pooh?"
he squeaked. You see what it is? He's jealous because he thinks Pooh is having a grand introduction all to himself. Pooh is the favorite, of course. There's no denying it. But Piglet comes in for a good many things which Pooh misses, because you can't take Pooh to school without everybody knowing it. But Piglet is so small that he slips into a pocket where he's very comfortable to feel him when you are not quite sure whether twice 7 is 12 or 22. Sometimes he slips out and has a good look in the ink pot. And in this way, he has got more education than Pooh. But Pooh doesn't have mind. Some have brains, some haven't, he says, and there it is. And now, all the others are saying, "What about us?" So, perhaps the best thing to do is to stop writing introductions and just get on with the book. A.A.M. So there are a couple of things, because Winnie the Pooh is illustrated with the most charming little hand-drawn illustrations. There are a couple of things that only make sense if you have the pictures that go along with the book. And so with preface, I will explain two of those things that only become obvious by looking at illustrations. One is when Christopher Robin and Winnie the Pooh go up and down stairs, it just describes Pooh as going bump, 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 and or the stairs bumping against the back of Pooh's head. And that's because Christopher Robin typically grabs Pooh by a limb, maybe say the front limb, and just sort of drags him down the stairs like a pillow. So his head just sort of bumps down the stairs. And second thing that I've got to explain before this first chapter is that Christopher Robin, when he goes to the 100-acre woods, typically brings with him a cork gun. Now, I don't know if modern kids even know what a cork gun is. You'd probably instantly recognize it from like old cartoons, though. It's like a little toy rifle that has a cork attached to a string. And so when you fire it, the cork shoots out like maybe 1.5 feet and then just kind of falls in this ridiculous toy-ish manner. Just kind of dangles underneath the barrel. Okay, so when they talk about Christopher Robin carrying a gun, it is very obvious in the illustrations that it's a toy cork gun. Published in 1926 by A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh, Chapter 1. In which we are introduced to Winnie the Pooh and some bees, and the stories begin. Here is Edward Bear, coming downstairs now, bump, 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 on the back of his head, behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs, but sometimes he feels that there really is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. And then he feels that perhaps there isn't. Anyhow, here he is at the bottom and ready to be introduced to you. Winnie the Pooh. When I first heard his name, I said, just as you are going to say, but I thought he was a boy. So did I, said Christopher Robin. Then you can't call him Winnie. I don't, but you said. He's Winnie the Pooh. Don't you know what there means? Ah, yes, now I do, I said quickly. And I hope you do too, because it is all the explanation that you are going to get. Sometimes Winnie the Pooh likes a game of some sort when he comes downstairs, and sometimes he likes to sit quietly in front of the fire and listen to a story. This evening...
What about a story?
Said Christopher Robin. What about a story? I said.
Could you very sweetly tell Winnie the Pooh one?
Well, I suppose I could, I said. What sort of stories does he like?
About himself.
Because, well, he's that sort of bear.
Oh, I see. So, could you, very sweetly?
I'll try, I said. So, I tried. Once upon a time, a very long time ago now, about last Friday, Winnie the Pooh lived in a forest all by himself, under the name of Sanders.
What does under the name mean?
Asked Christopher Robin. It means that he had the name over the door in gold letters and lived under it.
Winnie the Pooh wasn't quite sure, said Christopher Robin.
Now I am, said a growly voice. Then I will go on, said I. One day, when he was out walking, he came to an open place in the middle of the forest, and in the middle of this place was a large oak tree, and from the top of the tree there came a loud buzzing noise. Winnie the Pooh sat down at the foot of the tree, put his head between his paws, and began to think. First of all, he said to himself,
Well, that buzzing noise means something. You don't get a buzzing noise like that, just buzzing and buzzing without its meaning something. If there's a buzzing noise, somebody is making a buzzing noise, and the only reason I know for making a buzzing noise is because you're a bee.
Then he thought another long time and said,
And the only reason for being a bee that I know of is making honey.
And then he got up and said,
And the only reason for making honey is so as I can eat it.
So he began to climb the tree. He climbed and he climbed and he climbed. As he climbed, he sang a little song to himself. It went like this.
Isn't it funny how a bear likes honey? Buzz, buzz, buzz. I wonder why he does.
And then he climbed a little further and a little further, and then just a little further. By that time, he had thought of another song. It's a very funny thought that if bears were bees, they'd build their nests at the bottom of trees. And that being so, if the bees were bears, we shouldn't have to climb up all these stairs. He was getting rather tired by this time. So, that is why he sang a complaining song. He was nearly there now, and if he just stood on that branch, crack!
Oh, help,
said Pooh as he dropped 10 feet onto the branch below him.
If only I hadn't,
he said as he bounced 20 feet onto the next branch.
You see, what I meant to do,
he explained as he turned head over heels and crashed onto another branch 30 feet below.
What I meant to do, but of course, it was rather,
he admitted as he slithered very quickly through the next 6 branches.
It all comes, I suppose,
he decided, as he said goodbye to the last branch, spun round 3 times, and flew gracefully into a gorse bush.
It all comes of liking honey so much. Help!
He crawled out of the gorse bush, brushed the prickles from his nose, and began to think again. And the first person he thought of was Christopher Robin. "What? So, was that me?" said Christopher Robin in an awed voice, hardly daring to believe it. "That was you." Christopher Robin said nothing, but his eyes got larger and larger, and his face got pinker and pinker. So Winnie the Pooh went round to his friend Christopher Robin, who lived behind a green door in another part of the forest.
Good morning, Christopher Robin,
he said. "Good morning, Winnie the Pooh," said you.
I wonder if you've got such a thing as a balloon about you.
"A balloon?"
Yeah. I just said to myself, coming along, I wonder if Christopher Robin has such a thing as a balloon about him. I said it to myself, thinking of balloons and wondering.
"What do you want a balloon for?" you said. Winnie the Pooh looked round to see that nobody was listening, but paw to his mouth and said in a deep whisper,
Honey?
"But you don't get honey with balloons."
I do,
said Pooh. Well, it just happened that you had been to a party the day before at the house of your friend Piglet, and you had balloons at the party. You had had a big green balloon, and one of Rabbit's relations had had a big blue one and had left it behind, being really too young to go to a party at all. And so you had brought the green one and the blue one home with you. So, which would you like? You asked Pooh. He put his head between his paws and thought very carefully.
It's like this,
he said.
When you go after honey with a balloon, the great thing is not to let the bees know you're coming. Now, if you have a green balloon, they might think you were only part of the tree and not notice you. And if you have a blue balloon, they might think you were only part of the sky and not notice you. And the question is, which is more likely?
Wouldn't they notice you underneath the balloon? You asked.
They might, or they might not,
said Winnie the Pooh.
You can never tell with bees.
He thought for a moment and said,
I shall try to look like a small black cloud. That will deceive them.
Well, then you had better have the blue balloon, you said. And so it was decided. Well, you both went out with the blue balloon, and you took your gun with you, just in case, as you always did, and Winnie the Pooh went to a very muddy place that he knew of, and rolled until he was black all over. And then, when the balloon was blown up as big, and you and Pooh were both holding on to the string, you let go suddenly, and Pooh Bear floated gracefully up into the sky and stayed there, level with the top of the tree, and about 20 feet away from it. "Hooray!" you shouted.
Well, isn't that fine?
Shouted Winnie the Pooh down to you.
What do I look like?
You look like a bear holding on to a balloon, you said.
Not,
said Pooh anxiously.
Not like a small black cloud in a blue sky?
Not very much.
Oh. Well, perhaps from up here it looks different. And, as I say, you can never tell with bees.
There was no wind to blow him nearer to the tree, so there he stayed. He could see the honey, he could smell the honey, but he couldn't quite reach the honey. After a little while, he called down to you.
Christopher Robin,
he said in a loud whisper.
Hello?
I think the bees suspect something.
What sort of thing?
I don't know, but something tells me they're suspicious.
Well, perhaps they think that you're after their honey.
It may be that. You can never tell with bees.
There was another little silence, and then he called down to you again.
Christopher Robin,
Yes?
have you an umbrella at your house?
I think so.
I wish you would bring it out here and walk up and down with it and look up at me every now and then and say, "Tut tut, it looks like rain." I think if you did that, it would help the deception which we are practicing on these bees.
Well, you laughed to yourself. Silly old bear. But you didn't say it out loud because you were so fond of him, and instead you went home for your umbrella.
Oh, there you are,
called down Winnie the Pooh as soon as you got back to the tree.
I was beginning to get anxious. I've discovered that the bees are now definitely suspicious.
Shall I put my umbrella up?
You said.
Yes, but wait a moment. We must be practical. The important bee to deceive is the queen bee. Can you see which is the queen bee from down there?
No.
Oh. Well, that's a pity. Well, now, if you walk up and down with your umbrella, saying, "Tut tut, it looks like rain," I shall do what I can by singing a little cloud song, such as a cloud might sing. Go.
So, while you walked up and down and wondered if it would rain, Winnie the Pooh sang this song.
How sweet to be a cloud floating in the blue. Every little cloud always sings aloud. How sweet to be a cloud floating in the blue. It makes him very proud to be a little cloud.
The bees were still buzzing as suspiciously as ever. Some of them, indeed, left their nests and flew all round the cloud as it began the second verse of this song, and one bee sat down on the nose of the cloud for a moment, and then got up again.
Christopher, ow! Robin,
called out the cloud.
Yes?
I've just been thinking, and I've come to a very important decision. These are the wrong sorts of bees.
Are they?
Quite the wrong sort. So, I should think they would make the wrong sort of honey. Wouldn't you?
Would they?
Yeah. So, I think I shall come down.
How?
Asked you. Winnie the Pooh hadn't thought about this. If he let go of the string, he would fall, bump, and he didn't like the idea of that. So he thought for a long time, and then he said,
Christopher Robin, you must shoot the balloon with your gun. Have you got your gun?
"Well, of course I have," you said. "But if I do that, it will spoil the balloon," you said.
But if you don't,
said Pooh,
I shall have to let go, and that'll spoil me.
Well, when he put it like this, you saw how it was, and you aimed very carefully at the balloon and fired.
Ow!
Said Pooh. "Did I miss?" you asked.
You didn't miss,
said Pooh.
but you missed the balloon.
"I'm so sorry," you said, and you fired again. And this time you hit the balloon, and the air came slowly out, and Winnie the Pooh floated down to the ground. But his arms were so stiff from holding on to the string of the balloon all that time that they stayed up straight in the air for more than a week, and whenever a fly came and settled on his nose, he had to blow it off. And I think, but I'm not sure, that is why he was always called Pooh. "Is that the end of the story?" asked Christopher Robin. "Well, that's the end of that one. There are others. About Pooh and me, and Piglet and Rabbit and all of you. Don't you remember?" "I do remember. And then when I try to remember, I forget. That day when Pooh and Piglet tried to catch the heffalump." "They didn't catch it, did they?" "No. Pooh couldn't because he hasn't any brain. Did I catch it?" "Well, that comes into the story." Christopher Robin nodded. "I do remember," he said. "Only Pooh doesn't very well, so that's why he likes having it told to him again, because then it's a real story and not just remembering." "That's how I feel," I said. Christopher Robin gave a deep sigh, picking his bear up by the leg, and walked off to the door, trailing Pooh behind him. At the door, he turned and said, "Are you coming while I have my bath?" "I might," I said. "It didn't hurt him when I shot him, did it?" "Not a bit." He nodded and went out, and in a moment I heard Winnie the Pooh bump, 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 going up the stairs behind him. On to Chapter 2 of A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh. Chapter 2 is entitled "In Which Pooh Goes Visiting and Gets into a Tight Place." Edward Bear, known to his friends as Winnie the Pooh, or Pooh for short, was walking through the forest one day, humming proudly to himself. He had made up a little hum that very morning, and as he was doing his stoutness exercises in front of the glass, tra-la-la, tra-la-la, he stretched up as high as he could go, then tra-la-la, tra-la, oh help, la, as he tried to reach his toes. After breakfast, he had said it over and over to himself until he had learnt it off by heart. And now he was humming right through properly. It went like this. Tra-la-la, 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 rum-tum, tiddly-tum-tum, tiddly-di, tiddly-di, tiddly-di-di-di, rum-tum, tiddly-di-tum. Well, he was humming this hum to himself and walking along gaily, wondering what everybody else was doing and what it felt like being somebody else, when suddenly he came to a sandy bank, and in the bank was a large hole.
"Ah,"
said Pooh, as he echoed,
"Rum-dum-diddly-dum-dum. If I know anything about anything, that hole means rabbit,
he said.
and rabbit means company,
He said.
and company means food and listening to me humming and such like. Rum-tum tiddly-dum-tum.
So he bent down, put his head into the hole, and called out.
Is anybody at home?
There was a sudden scuffling noise from inside the hole, and then silence.
What I said was, is anybody at home?
Called out Pooh very loudly. No, said a voice, and then added, You needn't shout so loud. I heard you quite well the first time,
Oh, bother.
said Pooh.
Isn't there anybody here at all?
Nobody. Winnie the Pooh took his head out of the hole and thought for a little. And he thought to himself,
There must be somebody here because somebody must have said nobody.
So he put his head back in the hole and said,
Hello? Rabbit? Is that you?
No, said Rabbit in a different sort of voice this time.
But isn't that Rabbit's voice?
No, I don't think so.
Said Rabbit.
It isn't meant to be.
Oh,
Said Pooh. He took his head out of the hole and had another think, and then he put it back and said,
well, could you very kindly tell me where Rabbit is?
He's gone to see his friend Pooh Bear, who is a great friend of his. But,
This is me.
said Bear, very much surprised. What sort of me?
Pooh Bear?
Are you sure? Said the Rabbit, still more surprised.
Quite sure.
Said Pooh. Oh, well, then come in. So, Pooh pushed and pushed and pushed his way through the hole, and at last he got in. You were quite right, said Rabbit, looking at him all over. It is you. Glad to see you.
Who did you think it was?
Well, I wasn't sure. You know how it is in the forest. One can't have anybody coming into one's house. One has to be careful. What about a mouthful of something? Pooh always liked a little something at 11 o'clock in the morning, and he was very glad to see Rabbit getting out the plates and mugs, and when Rabbit said, Honey or condensed milk with your bread? He was so excited that he said,
Both.
and then, so as not to seem greedy, he added,
But don't bother about the bread, please.
and for a long time after that, he said nothing. Until, at last, humming to himself in a rather sticky voice, he got up, shook Rabbit lovingly by the paw, and said that he must be going on. Must you? Said Rabbit politely.
Well,
Said Pooh.
I could stay a little longer, if you...
And he tried very hard to look in the direction of the larder. As a matter of fact, said Rabbit, I was going out myself directly.
Oh, well then, I'll be going on. Goodbye.
Well, goodbye, if you're sure you won't have any more.
Is there any more?
Asked Pooh quickly. Rabbit took the covers off the dishes and said, no, there wasn't,
I thought not.
said Pooh, nodding to himself.
Well, goodbye. I must be going on.
So he started to climb out of the hole. He pulled with his front paws and he pushed with his back paws, and in a little while his nose was out in the open again. And then his ears, and then his front paws, and then his shoulders, and then,
Oh, help!
said Pooh,
I better go back. Oh, bother,
said Pooh.
I shall have to go on. I can't do either,
said Pooh.
Oh, help and bother.
Now, by this time, Rabbit wanted to go for a walk too, and finding the front door full, he went out by the back door and came round to Pooh and looked at him. "Hello, are you stuck?" he asked.
No,
said Pooh, carelessly.
I'm just resting and thinking and humming to myself.
"Here, give us a paw." Pooh Bear stretched out a paw, and Rabbit pulled and pulled and pulled.
Ow,
cried Pooh.
you're hurting.
"The fact is," said Rabbit, "you're stuck."
It all comes,
said Pooh, rather crossly,
of not having front doors big enough.
"It all comes," said Rabbit, sternly, "of eating too much." "I thought at the time," said Rabbit, "only I didn't like to say anything," said Rabbit, "that one of us was eating too much," said Rabbit. "And I knew if it wasn't me," he said, well, I shall go and fetch Christopher Robin." Christopher Robin lived at the other end of the forest, and when he came back with Rabbit and saw the front half of Pooh, he said, "Silly old bear," in such a loving voice that everybody felt quite hopeful again.
I was just beginning to think,
said Bear, sniffing slightly,
that Rabbit might never be able to use his front door again. I should hate that,
he said. "So should I," said Rabbit. "Use his front door again," said Christopher Robin. "Of course he'll use his front door again." "Ah, good," said Rabbit. "If we can't pull you out, Pooh, we might push you back." Rabbit scratched his whiskers thoughtfully and pointed out that when once Pooh was pushed back, he was back, and of course nobody was more glad to see Pooh than he was. Still, there it was. Some lived in trees, and some lived underground, and...
You mean I'd never get out?
asked Pooh. "I mean," said Rabbit, "that having gotten so far, it seems a pity to waste it." Christopher Robin nodded. "Then there's only one thing to be done," he said. "We shall have to wait for you to get thin again."
How long does getting thin take?
asked Pooh, anxiously. "Oh, about a week, I should think."
But I can't stay here for a week.
"Well, you can stay here, all right, silly old bear. It's getting you out which is so difficult."
Well, we'll read to you.
said Rabbit, cheerfully. "And I hope it won't snow," he added. "And I say, old fellow, you're taking up a good deal of room in my house. Do you mind if I use your back legs as a towel horse? Because, I mean, there they are, doing nothing, and it would be very convenient just to hang the towels on them."
A week?
said Pooh, gloomily.
What about meals?
"I'm afraid no meals," said Christopher Robin, "because of getting thin quicker. But we will read to you." Bear began to sigh, and then found he couldn't because he was so tightly stuck, and a tear rolled down his eye as he said,
Then would you read a sustaining book, such as would help and comfort a wedged bear in great tightness?
So, for a week, Christopher Robin read that sort of book at the north end of Pooh, and Rabbit hung his washing on the south end. And in between, Bear felt himself getting slenderer and slenderer. And at the end of the week, Christopher Robin said, "Now." So he took hold of Pooh's front paws, and Rabbits took hold of Christopher Robin, and all Rabbit's friends and relations took hold of Rabbit, and they all pulled together, and for a long time, Pooh only said, "Ow!" and "Oh!" And then, all of a sudden, he said, "Pop!" just as if a cork were coming out of a bottle. And Christopher Robin and Rabbit and all of Rabbit's friends and relations went head over heels backward, and on top of them came Winnie the Pooh, free. So, with a nod of thanks to his friends, he went on with his walk through the forest, humming proudly to himself. But Christopher Robin looked after him lovingly and said to himself, "Silly old bear." Oh, that is the first two. Oh, okay. I really loved that. I'm gonna I'm gonna do more of those for sure. And now for Ask Hunter Anything, where I answer questions submitted by you, the viewers. Please know that these episodes are live streamed on the Hunter's Acoustic Cabin YouTube channel every Monday evening at 9 o'clock California time, before they're made into this broadcast version. So you may hear reference to those who chat with me during my answers. And hey, if you have a question that you would like answered on Fireside Tailes for Wolfgang, email me using the email address AskHunterAnything@gmail.com. It's just a life's hobby, passion, ambition, whatever you want to call it, of mine. I'm just a really big fan of really good questions. Spent my entire life cultivating the best questions that I could possibly find. And I'd like to hear what questions that you have that you'd put into that category. So Mark in St. Louis asked, if you could go back in time and change any one thing, what would it be and why? That's a thought-provoking question, Mark in St. Louis. I mean, it seems like off the top of my head, most people would say something like, oh, I'd go back and like stop Hitler or something like that. If given the scope of the question, though, if I could just go back in time as far as I wanted, I'm tempted to say I would stop the Library of Alexandria from burning down. That would have, or I would at least back up the information in it. Either one would be fine. So the Library of Alexandria, I think I mentioned the Library of Alexandria on the show before for some reason. The Library of Alexandria was this huge library in Egypt. Alexandria. Yeah, Egypt. So North Africa and a port city. And it was kind of like this repository for world knowledge. I mean, Ptolemy was really Gestapo about gathering knowledge in any way, shape, or form that he could find it. In fact, because it was a port city, he was able to put this law in place where anyone with any printed materials, be they books or scrolls or letters, I mean, anything that was written down was immediately to be confiscated by the government. They then had scribes recopy whatever it was that you had in print. And they were so kind, if you were to wait around long enough, as to give you back the copies and keep the original. You can't say that it was really ethical, but damn, when that thing burned, some historians, and I have no idea how people come to this sort of number, some historians have put that one event alone as putting back the entire human species approximately 1,000 years in progress. I mean, we will never even know, or we will never even have a guess as to how much knowledge, information, and just sort of acquired multicultural learning was lost in that fire, or in those fires. It probably actually burned down in on multiple occasions. Like one occasion, probably it burned like a third of it or 2/3 of it, partly rebuilt, and then on another occasion, so it was probably actually burned on 2 or 3 different occasions. But yeah, off the top of my head, I'd prevent the Library of Alexandria from being burned, or at least from the information from being lost. And another Ask Hunter Anything question. Remember, you can submit your questions too by using the email address AskHunterAnything@gmail.com. Julia in Cape Girardeau. Well, got a couple of Missourians watching. Julia asked, if you could share a nice long meal with any 4 persons, living or dead, who would they be? Julia in Cape Girardeau. Okay. So, good question, Julia. I've entertained versions of this before on this show, where it's a gathering or whatever, and the number is almost arbitrary, but you specified 4 persons. Now, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and guess that language isn't going to be a barrier. And off the top of my head, so Carl Sagan and Einstein always have first dibs to my hypothetical table. John von Neumann was a Hungarian mathematician and physicist. He would be up there really high. But recently I've kind of been sort of subdividing this type of question in my head into other categories of answers. So like 3 people that I would love to talk to, I would love to like get to know on a regular basis. If you could have like an hour-long Zoom session with them once a week or something like that, I would say 3 of those folks would be Alan Turing, Isaac Newton, and Nikolai Tesla. And I want to put that in a different category as opposed to inviting them to the one meal, because all 3 of those cats, I could quite easily see them just sort of quietly eating and not actually saying anything or socially interacting in any way, and kind of like wishing that they weren't there the entire time. So it's like I would love to have an exchange with them. I just don't think a social setting like a meal would be a very productive place. So I'm kind of considering that. And I got a third category that just occurred to me in a conversation very recently. And that third category, like if I could have a few more people, like more than 4 at this table, I would immediately expand this. And Christina Beelan got one of these 2. If I could have more than 4, I would immediately expand this, the invites to Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley. Because, so they were a married couple, right? Mary Shelley is, of course, the one who wrote Frankenstein. Percy Shelley is a literary great incredible poet. And they were married and madly in love. And he was significantly older than her, and he died very tragically, very unexpectedly. He drowned. And I would invite the two of them just so they could have another couple of hours together. And I would not even obligate them to have to sit at the table with us, or if they wanted to sit somewhere else or just in another room altogether. So I've kind of added a third type of category to my answer, as people that I would invite to this hypothetical gathering just so that they could have a little more time together. And another Ask Hunter Anything question. Remember, you can submit your questions too by using the email address AskHunterAnything@gmail.com. Someone asked me if I like to think about silly things and just let my mind wander. Now, the context that she was asking was in regards to astrology, because she said, with a simple disclaimer, I don't really believe it. I don't really take it seriously. I just like to, it's just kind of fun to let my mind wander through and see all the things that seem to apply. And I was a little taken aback. And as I put my finger on why I was slightly taken aback, it's because one of the things that I like to do personally is be as aware as possible of my own observation biases. I collect observation biases the way some people collect stamps, because where I am aware of my own observation biases, those are places that I must look closer in order to disabuse myself of as many false beliefs as possible and embrace as many true things, discernibly true things, as possible. And do I have silly things that I like to let my mind wander around like that? And I don't know if this qualifies as a silly thing, but one of the things that I love to think about, because of the sheer stretch of imagination that it requires, is something called the Fermi paradox. So there was an Italian physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project. A little refresher on the United States history: the Manhattan Project was when, in the early 40s, we were working on atomic weapons. And Einstein would not participate, but the people, at least in the United States, who did participate, most of them were participating on the basis that if we don't get this, the Germans will. I don't know if they knew about the Holocaust yet, but they did know that Hitler was not the sort of dude that you want to have wielding the first atomic weapons. But back to the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi was an Italian physicist who was on our side, working with Americans and on the Manhattan Project. And he basically asked this very simple question, looking up into the night sky, hypothetically, and said, if the universe is so friendly and conducive to life, where's everybody else? Now, the funny thing about the Fermi paradox is that Fermi didn't think of it as a paradox at all. Fermi seems to have thought it was kind of an obvious question because space is so unimaginably big that if we live at the same time as another civilization, it's so damn far away we can't see each other, we can't talk to each other, we can't even know the other is a... Our galaxy alone, this is just our galaxy is about 100,000 light years across. So from one spiral arm to the, from one edge of the Milky Way to the other edge of the Milky Way, it takes light 100,000 years just across. So if there are other alien civilizations existing at the same time as us, and if we had something like a telescope that was powerful enough to see them, we would be seeing them 100,000 years ago and can't even send out a message like, hi, and expect that to get them to them in any time that they can respond and send a hi back sort of message, right? Now, that's just how big space is. Never mind also how deep time in our universe is. The chances that we're alive at the same time are astronomical. I mean, this is literally where we got the word astronomical. This is, right? And then the third thing that Fermi was thinking of is that life is probably, as a phenomenon, so extraordinarily unlikely, rare, maybe even singular, that he wasn't suggesting this to be a paradox at all. But what I personally like to do a lot, and have for several years, is just imagine answers to that question. If there are other life forms out there, why don't we see them? Why don't we hear from them? Thank you for joining us for this episode of Fireside Tales for Wolfgang. You can view more of my work at Hunter's Acoustic Cabin. Directed by Hunter Ackerman. Produced by GWC Productions. In memory of Wolfgang Beastly. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions' YouTube channel, Caps Media Television Channel 6 in Ventura on KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM and on the KPPQ Podcast Network. Episodes can also be viewed on Pasadena Media, either on Spectrum Charter Channel 32 or on AT&T UVerse Channel 99.